Hello, I'm Dr. Brielle Harbin, the founder and CEO of Your Cooperative Colleague Consulting. I work with faculty members who are doing everything right and still seem to feel like they're falling behind. And because I do this work, today I designed a talk where I can talk about why this happens because it's probably not what you think. And I'm going to tell you why in this presentation titled The Faculty Comparison Trap: Why You Feel Behind Even When You're Not. Today, I want to begin by naming a pattern that is likely familiar for many of you. So, you see a colleague announce a new publication, and then another. Then someone you started grad school with lands a grant that you didn't even know that they applied for. And somewhere between congratulating them and closing your laptop for the day from your session of writing, this quiet calculation starts. They have three publications. No, is it four or is it five? They've won $500,000 in grants, and I've only run 10,000. They're moving, they're making progress, and I'm just not. And if you've ever been in that moment, I just want to name and normalize that this is something that is so common. I talk to faculty members in so many different contexts, whether that's a teaching focused institution or an R1, about this same idea or thought pattern. And what you're doing actually is something very specific and it has a name. And I'm going to just put it out there now so that we can talk about it. What you're doing in this moment is you're running an inventory of your own life and you're getting caught up in what I call the faculty comparison trap. It's this accounting of what others have done and what you haven't, where you're tick marking here what people have done and doing a one-to-one comparison. And this process, this logic, this pattern is actually super corrosive, more corrosive than many people think, because it's not just the sting of the comparison that matters. In many cases, this thought pattern actually dampens how you see your own work. So here's a core idea that I want to anchor everything that I talk to you about in today. Comparing yourself to others in academia actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. When your department says just do more without actually telling you what more or enough looks like, when you're in a context where expectations keep shifting and no one is telling you plainly where you stand, you measure yourself against whatever is available because the institution gave you nothing else to measure yourself against. And so that is a part of this logic that I understand completely, and and is probably the reason why this pattern is so common. When no one tells you what enough looks like, the goalposts almost always keep moving. What counted last year doesn't seem to count this year. New initiatives get layered on, the metrics change, and nobody pauses to just say the thing plainly about where you stand. So you measure yourself against, again, like I mentioned, whatever is visible, and you're going to fill in the gap of the incomplete information with this comparison that you're making to other people's output. But what I am wanting to name in this presentation today is that what's actually happening in that comparison, because I don't think that most people really think about the consequences and downstream effect of this thought pattern, but we're going to do it here today. The consequence. When you are comparing your record to a colleague's, you are doing what I call an equation, right? You're doing a mathematical equation, but the mathematical equation that you're using is wrong. The core problem is that you are working with incomplete data in this calculation. When you're looking at a colleague's output, you see what they've produced, but you can't see anything that they are carrying. So you see their outside, you see their publications, their grants, their awards, their announcements, and you don't see if they have a parent whose care needs have really ramped up and have, you know, dominated their weeks or will potentially in the future. You don't know if they're managing a chronic illness that makes some days simply like work is unavailable to them because they just are not well enough. You don't know whether their department is generative or toxic, or whether their teaching load is protected or expanding. If they had a colleague who left the department and now they're absorbing both their original work and that person's, you don't know what had to be traded in that context to produce the work that they did, what ended up being delayed, or what, level of depletion was required to produce what it is that you are able to see on their outside. But, and this is where the comparison trap comes in, you're comparing your inside with all the complexities that I just named that you are able to see, your teaching load, service commitments, caregiving, all of that, all the complexity that comes with that, as well as the constraints and the invisible labor to their outside, which is at best a curated partial picture of what the work took and required of them in terms of both compromise and sacrifice. So, what I'm naming today by shining a light on this faculty comparison trap is that when you measure yourself that way, you will almost always come up short, even when that's not true. The person whose record looks the most impressive from my experience, not just as a faculty member, but now as a person who supports faculty members as both a consultant and coach, is that the person that looks the most impressive from the outside may be the person paying the highest price to produce it. And that's actually not a model that many of you would want to imitate or replicate. Rather, that should be a warning sign. It would be a warning sign if you had more complete information. So, some of you might be asking if this equation is bad, if the faculty comparison trap is actually keeping you unhappy, what do you do instead? And my answer to that is that you correct it. I'm going to walk you through something that I call the correction. It's 3 steps, and you can do this right now while you're watching or after with just a simple pen and paper. I think it's actually more powerful if you press pause to do it. But it'll take about 10 minutes and it will really change if you're anything like the folks that I've worked with, how you're thinking about your own progress. So let's get into it. Step number 1, write your hidden CV. Every faculty member has at least 2 CVs. There's the version that we talk about most commonly that the institution sees, that includes the publications, the grants, the awards, the lines that count, quote unquote. And then the one that nobody sees, your what I call hidden CV. And this includes everything that you're carrying that never really gets a line that is providing full context to what you're carrying. So this could be your teaching load. Yes, we do tend to list our courses, but we don't list if it's a new prep, how many students are in there, if you have students who are requiring disproportionate, labor in terms of helping them catch up because they have not had they don't have the proper foundation for the course, or all the different things that can cause teaching to expand. They also include your service commitments. So, this is not just the sit on a committee, this is the invisible labor of students coming to your office because you are the one who they identify with, or you are a person that seems approachable relative to other faculty in your department. It also doesn't list at all your caregiving responsibilities, whether that's children, aging parents, a partner, or you yourself because you have your own chronic health issues. And of course, all of this encompasses emotional labor that you're carrying. So, this can look like a lot of different things, whether it be from your personal life or your work life. But just an example that's probably familiar to most of you all, the student who comes to your office in crisis, especially the political weight of this moment, not just for your students, but for you, right? And your colleagues. You're probably having thoughts now and having to think about things now that you just haven't in the last 5 to 10 years, or even further back than that, right? So all of these things are things that need to be taken into account when thinking about your capacity. But they're also the things that never make it into your CV, but they're requiring just as much from you as getting those words on the paper, as submitting that grant application in terms of your bandwidth and your capacity. So, for this first step in the comparison correction, I want you to write it all down. What is the stuff that is on your hidden CV that maybe you aren't even recognizing is there now? And I want you to pause here to do it. And we're going to talk about why this is important after you do this brain dump. All right, so I'm assuming that you have paused and you have your list in front of you. Let's talk about not just the what to do, but the why. The reason that this first step of writing your hidden CV is so important is that most faculty, especially the ones that I work with, have never ever seen their own load on a paper all in one place, right? It's more like a mental listing that you're carrying with you, and you're carrying it mentally, but also, and most importantly, in your body. And that is often as tension, as fatigue, as a vague sense of, feeling like you're behind, but you've never actually mapped that feeling, that sense to its source. The hidden CV helps you do that. And so when you go through this process of dumping everything onto a sheet of paper so that you can make it visible and see it, it allows for something inside of you to shift. Because when you can finally see what you've been producing relative to what you're actually carrying, the ratio that you see almost always looks different than what that comparison was telling you. Let's move on to step two of the comparison correction, which is hand them your hidden CV. So now in this step, we're taking that list that you just wrote and we're remembering the person that we were thinking about when we were talking about a colleague whose output made you feel behind, whether that was a publication announcement, a grant, whatever triggered in your mind what went off when I was going through that calculation at the start. I want you to now mentally hand them your full list. I want you to give them your teaching load, your caregiving, your committee work, your health, everything on your hidden CV. And after you mentally hand that over to them, I want you to ask yourself a question. Would I still expect them to produce at the same level, at the same pace, if they were carrying everything that I just handed over to them? Would I judge them for not keeping up? And for most people, the answer to this question without without any hesitation is no. You wouldn't. You would offer them grace. You would say, of course you're not keeping up. Look at what you're carrying. Or perhaps it's you are keeping up. Look at what you're carrying. This thought process, this unfolding, is the comparison trap correcting itself. Watch as you're going through this thought process, this hypothetical, what happens to the math when you fully account for the complete picture that is both the hidden CV and the output. When this happens, the comparison almost always collapses under the weight of what you're actually carrying. And what typically happens is that you're in a different position. You can't continue in this cycle the same way, and you stop, asking yourself the wrong question, this common question that faculty are asking themselves over and over again. I see it so many times as a faculty member. I even ask myself this. It's why am I not producing as much as they are? And that question has no good answer. It will always, almost always, make you feel behind. And so, what I want to suggest for you as a reframe today is the better question to ask yourself, the quote unquote correct question is instead, what does meaningful progress look like for someone carrying what I'm carrying? That question is something that you can actually answer. It's also a question that allows you to take your whole self, your whole life, all of your circumstances into account. Now, step 3 of the comparison correction. Define what enough looks like for you. In this step, you're taking into account what you're actually holding. So, right now in this season, what is the one thing that would feel like real movement? And you are not defining enough by your colleague standards, by an idealized institutional version of a faculty member who has infinite time and no life outside of work. That doesn't exist. It has never existed. Instead, you are creating a definition of enough that's yours. And that's actually one of the things that I do with faculty members, that I help them feel define their enough so that when you hit these career milestones, like going up for tenure, going up for full professor, going up and applying for a grant, or all the different things where, there can be the possibility for rejection. That rejection lands differently when you have already decided what is enough, right? It's no longer a deficit on your part when things don't happen because you did the best that you could and it was on your terms. And of course, we take institutional expectations into mind, but we also consider other factors. And I think that is the gap between where we are having a more holistic, well being centered vision of faculty life, when we are thinking not just about the institutional standard, but the other things that matter for us with our career and with our life more broadly. And so that's one of the things that I do, is helping people define enough on their own terms for the life that you're actually living. And I just want to be clear that this is not about lowering the bar. Most of the faculty members that I work with, I'll just actually say this, all of the faculty members that I work with in my consulting and one on one coaching are very high achieving, highly motivated, top of every list, check mark, star, highlight, bold, underline. So, this is not about lowering the bar. Rigor is something that you probably pride yourself on, being ambitious as well. This exercise is about placing the bar somewhere more realistic, somewhere that accounts for the full reality of what you're carrying so that when you do make progress that you can actually see it and you feel it and you're taking that progress into the broader context of the life that you are living. And so, please, if you remember nothing else from today's session that I've said, I hope that you remember this, that you deserve you deserve the same clarity and grace that you give everyone else. I would imagine that for many of you all who are watching, you may have colleagues who are always saying that you are so this, so that, that you have students who are admiring the ways that you show up for them, that the ways that you show up for your partner, for your family, for your children, all the ways that you extend grace to everyone but yourself. You deserve that too. And so, this presentation, if about nothing else, is reminding you of that. If any of this resonated that I talked about today, I write about these kinds of topics every week in my Substack titled Notes from a Work Friend. It's free to subscribe, and it's where I go deeper on the patterns that are keeping faculty stuck right now and offer reframes that actually help you move forward and move differently. And I'd love to have you be part of the community. You can use the QR code on the screen, or you can feel free to visit me at notesfromaworkfriend.substack.com. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Please take good care of yourself.